Set your course for the Hoth
Takes podcast.
Welcome back to Hoth Takes. I'm Eric Geller.
I'm Grace Seegers.
And I'm Haley Birdwilt.
And we're back with you to talk about the back half of the Book of Boba Fett Season 1, I guess. Maybe there's more, who knows? I was about to call it The Mandalorian, which, as we'll get into, is very fitting. And right off the top, I think it's safe to say that the three of us did not enjoy how this show turned out. If you were listening for our discussion of the first half of the show, you probably caught that we had some serious issues with the way that things were going or not going, as the case may be. And I'll speak for myself. It did not satisfy me with that second half. It did not stick the landing. But I actually want to turn things over to Grace to start with, because in our pre-recording discussions, it is clear that Grace has the strongest feelings about how this show ended. So Grace, why don't you kick us off as best as you can with as few profanities as possible. Go ahead and share with the lovely people how you felt about this, the second half of the show.
So in order to keep the profanities out, I will just describe to you, in our show notes leading up to this episode, there was a point where I wrote a bunch of angry bullet points in all caps with multiple expletives, and then ended it with an italicized and bolded all caps "Gah!" of rage. So I was not the biggest fan, and it's because I hate to see wasted potential. And that's all this show was wasted potential of pretty much everything. I mean, first of all, the titular character, Boba Fett, it was called the Book of Boba Fett, except for like the 3 episodes where he just isn't really in it at all. Because it's actually the Mandalorian Season 3 JK for a couple episodes. And so it's really frustrating to see the wasting of his character. Why did we go through all of those frickin' flashbacks, which, as we talked in the previous Book of Boba Fett episode of Hoth Takes, we were all annoyed by how much time the flashbacks were taking, and then they didn't even lead anywhere. And what was the point? With the Tusken Raiders showing their culture, if actually no, they were just killed off, and they served no other purpose than to advance Boba's plotline. And I mean, it was just a waste. It was a waste of his character. It was a waste of Ming-Na Wen's character, Fennec Shan. Even the small characters. Like, what was the point of having the Twi'lek bar owner whose name I'm forgetting? Like, what? It's yeah. That's my initial thoughts.
Okay, Haley, where do you want to take it from there? Do you agree?
So, yes, I would say I'm like, there's part of me, and I sort of got into this in our first episode, that like enjoys how messy it was. Partly because, you know, part of the fear is so much of entertainment and IP is like being consolidated into this big, sleek, you know, entertainment conglomerate. And you would expect everything to be super vetted and like, you know, it goes through a huge production process, and they don't want to have anything just like weird unless it's intentionally weird. And this very much like had imprints of like an individual director and filmmaker behind it who had a vision, like for the Scooter Gang, for example, and for sort of this cyberpunk vision of like, you know, the new young people of Tatooine, like which it did not pan out well, but I like, part of me just enjoys having had that experience of, oh, like there's still capacity, because Mandalorian is very sleek, right? Like they're trying to atone for the sins of, you know, the sequel trilogy, and they're trying to make everybody happy. This one was not that, and I would love to understand why. Like it seems that the amount of attention to the plot just was not there. The dialogue was pretty clunky in places. Like, I'm sure we'll get into it, but like Boba as a character, I don't understand some of his most of his tactical decisions don't make any sense.
Because they weren't good.
They were terrible decisions. It was terrible decisions. All around it, just a pretty, like, goofy show. But I will say, like, if we're judging by children, which I know some children who have watched this show, they were into it. So, I mean, I don't want to, like, hate on it too much. And I know there's people with mixed opinions, but I mostly agree with Grace in that it very much wasted characters, very much a plot that didn't make a lot of sense. It sort of just seemed thrown together in some places, especially like the Mandalorian episodes, which again, like I 100% agree, did not do justice to the Mandalorian Grogu relationship. Like that should have just been separate, you know, like their reunion should not have been this like sideshow and this. My favorite is just the finale was such a mess. It was so much going on. I don't know. It is a little bit baffling to me.
I just need to pop in here real quick, and then Eric can say whatever very smart thing that Eric will say. But it was just absolutely undermined the end of The Mandalorian season 2, too, because the end of season 2 is really emotional. Luke takes Grogu away. Mando lifts his helmet. There is these huge emotional stakes, and it feels genuine. It feels real. And all of that is undermined because they are reunited 3 episodes later and not even in the right show. Oh my God!
I will say though, I wish it had been separate, but like of course there were moments that you enjoy watching that, especially like at the end of it you're like, he's gonna choose his father, he's going back to the Mandalorian who I've decided is his father. Like that sort of decision, like there's heartwarming things, you know. And I was tweeting about it too, like some of the characters really shone despite the screenwriting. Like the Major Domo, I read is the correct title for the mayor's assistant, was perfect. Amy Sedaris was perfect. It like there were great things that they could have built on. It's just,
but they didn't.
Well, and you know, if anybody was reading my kind of Twitter reactions to the second half of the season in particular, you probably saw that it read probably as very conflicted, because I would tweet out like, this was fun and this was cute and this was cool, but at the end of the day, overall, the episode was a failure because it shouldn't have been happening on this show. And that gets to what we've been talking about, which is kind of the Mandalorian of it all. You know, if I could ask Dave Filoni one question, it would be, when you finished season 2 of The Mandalorian and you ended it in that way, did you already know how Book of Boba Fett would use and reintroduce and reconnect Grogu and the Mandalorian? Did you know at the time that that was going to be the next stage of their relationship, and that was how quickly we were going to see it? I don't know. I don't even know what I would guess would be the answer to that. It's completely opaque to me as far as that process, but I would hope that he didn't know. In Dave we trust. That's what I'll say there. Listen, a lot of the Grogu and Mando stuff was adorable. It was great. And if it had happened on The Mandalorian season 3 a year from now or whatever, I would say A+, great, love it. Really cool stuff. Even the Luke stuff where he's basically putting this choice on the table for Grogu and saying, it's me or him, kid. I tweeted out that, like, it seemed to me to be the wrong thing for Luke to do, but I understand why maybe as a character he hasn't yet realized that. And then this great Twitter account, 1138, which I recommend everybody follow, made the point that Luke doesn't actually know Grogu's mind and his heart and know how in control of his emotions he is, so he's making the prudent choice at that point to not encourage this kid to form and retain this attachment. He's basically trying to see if he can trust Grogu to be that attached yet. So that's a whole other conversation. But anyway, there's more than one layer to Luke's kind of to the choice that he presents there for Grogu, and I think you could make arguments on either side. But the bigger picture is, this shouldn't have happened on this show. Okay, this was not the Mando-Grogu reunion show. Even the stuff with Amy Sedaris, again, a perfect example. She's phenomenal. I love her. It shouldn't have been this show. You know, Mando getting his new starfighter, I think it's really interesting that he is, wants to go from a freighter type ship to basically just a single pilot,
terrible. It's
fighter.
terrible.
But think about what it means for him, right? He's basically saying, like, I'm going to give up the bounty hunter life, and I'm going to do something different. And I've got my little astromech slot for Grogu if he ever comes back to me. But, like, again, great character development for Mando. Should not have happened on this show. The Ahsoka stuff, I basically, I fangirled over Luke and Ahsoka together because, my God, how long have we wanted to see that, right? And all of a sudden, it's like, without even realizing it, oh my God, we're seeing it. I mean, when she says to him, you're so much like your father, I mean, my God, that is one of the most heart-stopping lines of Star Wars in a long time, but it should not have happened here. It actually makes me really sad that it did happen here because it wasn't given the space to be its own thing. It was crammed into this other thing that itself was not given the space to be its own thing. You had two things that should be their own thing, but they were each forced to mingle with each other, to meld with each other, and neither of them could be what they should be. And I'm going to end my rant by posing this question to the two of you, and I'd like to hear how you respond. The people who really like what was done here will say it was called the Book of Boba Fett, not Star Wars Boba Fett. It was like the Bible, right? It's not just the story of Jesus. It's the story of all the people that Jesus affects and that are around Jesus.
I'm not comfortable with this comparison.
You got two Christians here who are
right. I was going to say, I am the least religious person here. I'm also the only Jew here. So, Christians, can you weigh in here on the analogy to this being a Book of Boba Fett?
Well, okay. I'm going to set the analogy aside. But I do think that is an interesting defense in the sense that, personally, and I don't want to be like the kid who's like, but what about his weapons? And like, why doesn't he fight? Like,
no, be that person.
I am very much that person.
Yeah.
I am very much that person. And it was so frustrating to me because my favorite episode of Mandalorian last season was when Boba, like when he fought everyone, that episode, because it was perfect. And we had like, I don't know, 5 seconds of him actually doing it at the very end of the finale of this one. And it was just so... And I guess if you're encapsulating the whole series with one line, it's his last line at the end when he's walking with Fennec. And he's like, maybe we're not well suited to this life. And it's like, yeah, you aren't at all. You're not a diplomat. You're not I don't understand why he's like decided to be the union leader or like running for mayor or something. It doesn't make sense. He's like, I'm going to represent everyone well, and drugs are bad, and I want to be my own
and water
boss.
Prices need to be fair. We need to set fair water prices.
It's just deeply silly to me, and maybe part of my resentment of that is like, we all work in politics, and I like covering politics, and I don't want like to be watching local, people dealing with constituents on Star Wars, especially Boba Fett, who we know can be like exciting, and especially Fennec at the both of them. It could have been handled much better, and I know it's like more expensive to do the action choreography or whatever, but like it's Disney, and you see it at the very end when Fennec just sort of takes everyone out. It's like, why didn't you do this sooner? Like, why did we
Best scene in the whole show, if you ask me personally.
She should have just done that at the beginning.
That was the best
I don't understand. That bothered me. Like, to me, that's like, why? Why did everyone have to deal with a Rancor and a giant robot on the loose? Like, when Fennec could have just dealt with this whole thing in like 2 minutes.
See, okay, first of all, that's another example of Ming-Na Wen being wasted, and Fennec as a character being wasted because she was so freaking cool, and we did not get to see her be cool very often.
That bothered me.
And then this reminds me, too, of when Cad Bane shows up, and he's like, Bubby, what are you doing here? And Boba's like, this is my town. And we're all going, is it though? Is it your town?
You're not a local.
Yeah, you got here 5 minutes ago, and this is all of a sudden your town? Please. I mean, also, who is another character who was wasted? Cad Bane. And this is petty, but he should have had a bigger hat. I understand. I understand the constraints of translating from animation to live action, but Cad Bane's hat is very big, and I wanted it to be bigger.
Wait, not to interrupt an incredible critique after we've zigzagged from the truly the highest of highs to the lowest of lows here, but I think he actually loses his famous hat in the Clone Wars and gets another one.
Yeah, and he couldn't get a better hat. I mean,
all right.
in the 20 years.
If anything, the hat should have been bigger than the.
Oh, I would have loved it if in every scene the hat got bigger.
He's got bigger hat.
You know, this was actually my husband's main criticism of it is, the
hat was too small.
No, not the hat. Cad Bane is like the best character in Star Wars, and he was just
wasted.
He was devastated to see him die so soon. Like I want a lot more episodes of Cad Bane, and they definitely left the door open, for in between chronological, bring him back in some form. But seeing him die so soon was frustrating.
Yet another example of there not being the emotional stakes that there should have been, because when you see Cad Bane and Boba get together, it should be, this kind of momentous moment. Like, the last time I saw you, you were this 12-year-old punk. Yeah. And instead, it's just like, well, here we are again. I guess we'll fight. And then Boba kills him. And it should have resonance that he's killing Cad Bane and that he's doing so with the stick that he learned how to forge from the Tuskens. But it doesn't, because neither of those had room to breathe.
The only thing I was going to say is we don't know for sure that Cad Bane is even dead because they decided to just introduce the idea that you can just bring people back from the dead whenever you want, as long as you find this random roboticist guy who just happens to be within arm's reach on Tatooine. Can we just very briefly, let's just take one quick divergence into the last thing that we see from this show after the completely off-base final scene of the episode, which is with Mando and Grogu, which is sort of a perfect encapsulation of how this show did not know what it was doing. But even after that, the mid-credit scene, and Grace is going to get mad at me for this, the mid-credit scene is we see that Boba is bringing Cobb Vanth, who very clearly died, back to life, which again, okay, I guess we're introducing that concept, but we're supposed to care that Cobb Vanth is being resurrected, the most one-dimensional character on this entire show, who has absolutely no depth to him whatsoever and is the stereotypical reluctant Western lawman. Like, that's the send-off moment of, like, oh man, the next coming up next in the Star Wars television universe, Cobb Vanth is alive. Like, are you genuinely telling me that I'm supposed to care about him at all?
Here's my related complaint, is his, I don't remember which episode it was, but whoever his deputy was looked way too much like him, and it bothered me. It was like his cousin was filling in on the side.
Oh, that was Rob Vanth. Yeah. No,
yeah,
you didn't see that in the credits? Yeah.
Yeah, so what I will say here, in my only defense, and it's not a good one, this is not a good defense, is that you have to bring your pre-existing love for Timothy Olyphant, the actor who plays him, and project that onto the character. So you have to be like, oh my god, remember how freaking good Justified was and how good Timothy Olyphant was in that? Take that love that you have for Raylan Givens from Justified and from Seth Bullock from Deadwood, and you project that onto Cobb Vanth, who is just like a blank slate. And that's where your emotional resonance comes from, or at least it was for me. Also, side note for you Deadwood fans out there who also listen to this podcast, all three of you, the guy who played the bartender of Freetown was Dan Doherty from Deadwood. How cool is that, right, guys? Right? Okay.
Crickets.
It was cool.
I will say this, the Boba Cad sort of showdown, I had put in my notes that it was decent because I thought that, yes, it would have been great if we could have had more dialogue establishing that these two had a past and all that. I don't know that there was necessarily a ton of time to give us much more than what we saw. Maybe a couple lines would have helped. I don't necessarily know. But I think that, listen, we all knew that this fight was going to happen. It was all going to come down to this. The fact that they had it end not with the shootout, but actually with a connection back to these people that Boba has lost. I thought that was good. I'm not saying it was the best sort of climactic fight I've ever seen on a TV show. I thought it was serviceable. It's certainly better than I expected it to be based on everything that had come before it.
The finale is something to behold. Like, separate from everything else in this season, the finale, like, you think it's ending, and it just keeps going. It's and I've always been the kind of person who doesn't like movies or shows that are just like a giant battle sequence. I know some people are really into that kind of thing. For me, I just can't, like, my brain can't follow it. And I need, like, the interpersonal drama, and there wasn't enough of that for me in, like, a lot of that episode. But, like, there are scenes that are just hilarious. Like Grogu and Mando are reunited, and they're on some kind of, like, moving vehicle, and they're with Amy Sedaris. Evan and I had to watch this, like, 3 times. It was so funny, but they get, like, blown up or something. And Amy Sedaris is, like, flying in the air, and Mando, like, catches Grogu, and it, like, he doesn't save Amy Sedaris at all, and she, like, lands on the ground and spits out some teeth.
It's hilarious.
It's so, like, some of it was, like, absurd in a delightful way, but so much, like, that episode, I just would love to see, like, the writers' meetings behind that one. Or the emails. We need to FOIA the emails.
I have some bad news for you about FOIA.
I didn't go to J school.
It's funny that you mentioned wanting more interpersonal drama, because I think there's a great moment in this episode that makes me realize how much that was missing. It's when the people of Freetown have shown up, and the girl from Freetown teams up with the biker gang girl, and they sort of do some, cool stuff. And they have these, like, lines back and forth about how it's basically like there's this tension between, like, the city girl and the rural girl.
They should have fallen in love.
Well, I think that it is an interesting concept that could have been explored on a TV show about a guy who is trying to rule this territory. What are the social and political tensions that he's going to have to deal with? And this clearly hinted at the idea that there is some kind of tension here, but they never explored it. Like, it was introduced in that moment, and we were supposed to, I guess, feel it, but I didn't feel it. I wanted more of it. I knew I was supposed to feel it, but they just didn't focus on it.
I feel like what, like, the craving behind this is to feel like there's some kind of society underneath this story.
Exactly.
And there's not one.
Not.
It's a cardboard set with, like, 12 people involved.
Exactly.
And you just have to deal with it.
Yeah.
I personally didn't like that moment because it just felt sort of forced and cheesy. But
Well,
that's
the
me.
whole... Yeah, I mean, all of it was forced and cheesy. Because I exist right now to be angry at this show, but also point out the other stuff that the actors in this show were in, the other and better stuff. The biker girl is Natalie from Yellow Jackets. Crazy guys, right?
Wait, is she the British girl?
Yeah.
Here's my other, like, extremely, like, stupid Star Wars criticism recently is all the recent Star Wars women, except for, like, Fennec, are just brunette British women.
Brunette, like, white, brown-haired British woman. We get it.
It bothers me.
I agree with that, and I also like Grace's evolution on this episode into just angry IMDb. Just like I will tell you who these actors played in other TV shows, and I will also
TV
yell.
shows.
I do want to recognize, though, I feel personally, like, bad. Like, I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings about, like, working on this. Like, let's talk about some nice things.
I want to hurt Jon Favreau's feelings.
No! I don't want anyone to listen to me say mean things.
Okay, all right. Here's
So
something.
it's time to say some positive things about the show.
Okay, one positive thing. I thought that the Order 66 flashback in the 6th episode, I guess, where we see Grogu, like, at the temple, I thought that was interesting. It makes me want to know what comes next. How do you guys think Grogu got away?
Well, he was so small.
Yeah. Just teeny tiny.
Just crawling around, like.
Or they just thought he was really cute, so they let him go.
So that I don't think is what happened, but Listen, if Haley, if you want to do 5 minutes of like just good vibes, let's talk about the scene in episode 5 where Mando has to gate check his weapons to get on the freighter and has a conversation with the droid who's basically like, sir, unless you have TSA pre-check, I'm going to have to ask you to put these in storage.
That was good. I like having the ability to be a little bit silly.
Yeah,
I
think there's a place for even the slapsticky stuff, like Amy Sedaris spitting out her teeth. Like,
she was great.
I don't
She was
mind
wonderful.
that. Like, I think Star Wars needs more of that irreverence, particularly in the live action properties where the style is just a little bit less inherently. There's less opportunity for sort of bulging eyes and slapstick, physical comedy that you see in animation a lot. Although obviously Star Wars Rebels, Star Wars Clone Wars are not all humor, but there's a little bit more opportunity for that in terms of just the vibe of animation. I'd like to see more of that in live action. And I will say, to their credit, I don't know if this is John or Dave or whoever, some of that is in here in Book of Boba Fett, and I think some of it is actually done well. Like, again, I don't think that all this Mando stuff should have been in here, but if it's going to be in here, those little moments of him having to gate check his weapons, it's just fun. It's funny. It's a kind of a funny use of time.
I agree.
I want to say I do have a lot of criticism, but none of that criticism is directed towards the actors themselves, who were trying very hard to do good stuff with limited material. And in fact, I am angry on their behalf, and most specifically on the behalf of Tem Morrison and Ming-Na Wen, that their characters did not have the due that they deserved, and that they did the best they could with material that wasn't working in their favor. And I just genuinely wish that we had gotten better for them. But like we mentioned, that scene with Fennec Shand at the end where she murders all those guys, like, that was great. That was the assassin that we were promised. That's the role she deserves. And my anger, like I said earlier, comes from seeing the potential here and the little glimpses of good moments, and then having it either be wasted or just have them totally reverse and be like, haha, JK, like they did with the Tuskens plotline.
What do we, there's like an underlying, people have a counterpoint to my complaint about why didn't Boba fight more, which is underpinning this series is sort of this theme and this story about him, trying to learn how to be a diplomat and make alliances and turn away from violence and solving some of his problems, and learning about the Tusken Raiders. And what do we think about the attempt at that character arc? It's setting aside, the way that it was delivered. Like, if you were in the meetings for the story, I think there are some people who are like, oh, like, that just doesn't fit his character. Like, it shouldn't have been this way. Whereas other people seem you sort of get into it in the finale where Cad Bane is like, what are you doing? like, why are you doing this? And we talked about it in our first episode where we were like, what is his motivation? Like, why doesn't he just move on with his life instead of sort of having this battle? Do we think it was like a worthy storyline for Boba?
Well, I think it could have been if they did it correctly, but they didn't. So here we are.
Yeah, I think when we first talked about Book of Boba Fett on this show, I was kind of like, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. I've never been particularly interested in Boba Fett, but I also at the same time don't necessarily see him evolving into a person who wants to be the sort of the diplomat, the sort of the peaceful leader. And frankly, I think I was vindicated. Like, I don't actually know that there is a way to tell this story in a good way, in a believable way, because I just don't think that Boba Fett is the kind of person whose past would lead him to want to do any of this. And that, I think that's why it feels clumsy and it feels forced, is because there is no more natural, more story-driven way of putting him into these shoes where he is the guy who just kind of sits on the throne and accepts, offerings and goes out and negotiates, water rights or whatever. Like, I just don't see him as a person who's fundamentally compatible with that kind of role. And I don't think there's a way that they could have pulled it off well.
I feel like if they had just given in and let him be a crime lord, which is what the end of The Mandalorian end credits scene that teased this show made it seem like it was going to be. They made it seem like it was going to be like, hey, Boba's back in town, baby.
Right. I mean, he kills Bib Fortuna and sits on the throne. That is not the first act of a person who then wants to go on and say, oh, no shooting. No, let's all just be friends.
You know what bothers me most about this specific aspect is, like, the moral divide here. They try so hard to, like, make him seem like the good guy. And, we want the ambiguity. We think it's, like, fun and interesting. But there's sort of this, like, no, you killed, like, a whole biker gang in cold blood without any, like, actual evidence of their perceived crime. Like, you're so, and there's no reckoning with that in the show. There's no, like, actual, there's nobody asking questions about that. Like, he's just, friends with Mando and Grogu, so he must be good. I think it's, like, I don't know, a little too simplistic in some of those ways. Like, there's not really a reason to root for him beyond the fact that, like, oh, like, he's supposed to be the good guy. He doesn't want drugs in his town. But he'll also, like, he's a cold-blooded kid. Like, he is. Like, Cad Bane says that about him, and that part of his personality didn't really change, even though we don't see the violence this season. Like, there were moments, it's like, yeah, that was a dumb thing that he did, and that was, like, cold-blooded. That was one thing that bothered me about the finale. Like, he didn't even have a reaction, really, to learning that all those people he just shot down from the sky, the way he killed them bothered me too. I will say. And Fennec's just, like, sitting there smugly, like, yes, this is good. Nobody behaves that way.
I was gonna say that felt really anticlimactic, given that the flashbacks were, in retrospect, exclusively there to set up his anger at this biker gang, and we thought his anger at the Pykes when it was revealed, and by the way, I correctly predicted this, that the Pykes had sent the biker gang to kill the Tuscans. They were the power behind that biker gang.
I thought the biker gang didn't do it. I thought he said we made it look like they did it, and the Pykes actually did it, and then they just put, like, the biker gang symbol.
I thought that they did it on the behalf of the Pykes. I'm pretty. I don't know. Grace, can you break the tie?
I had a different interpretation.
I side with Haley. That's how I heard it. But what the real takeaway here is that they really messed up the Tuskens plotline.
Yes, I mean, regardless of whether the Pykes ordered
killed them, that's the takeaway.
The point of that storyline seemed to be to justify Boba's sense of vengeance against whoever had done it ultimately, except he never found out that the Pykes had either done it or told the biker gang to do it. He never found out about that. I guess maybe Fennec might have told him later because we know she overheard that conversation, but, like, that was never a motivation for him. That was never a driving force of, like, I'm going to get back at you because you killed all of them. And then when he did kill the people that at least he thought killed the Tuskens, it was so anticlimactic, like just shooting at them from, like, picking them off from his ship in the sky in the way that, like, in a video game, that's like
it could have been a different biker gang.
Well, I guess.
Like, stop to ask them some questions.
I give him credit for tracking down the right biker gang, at least.
As far as we know.
Right, yeah. But I don't know. Just, I think that, like, it would have been better if he had done it, like, on the ground in a more intimate and violent way. That would have felt more believable. Like, it's not like I don't want to see gruesome, like, one-on-one, hand-to-hand killing, but, like, that's what I would have believed Boba Fett would have done in that moment if he could have found them. Like, I just don't buy that he would have done it in such a sort of impersonal way.
Yeah, I didn't, and it again, that's sort of a wasted opportunity in the sense that, like, it feels gross to watch it. like, at least for me, maybe I'm too much of a squish, but like it felt weird, and like he's sort of a bad guy to be just like picking them off from the sky. But you also do waste the opportunity to have like a John Wick style, like, you know, action sequence of him fighting all of them, which, like, it's Boba Fett and we have seen them do it extremely well in the past. Like, that would have been great.
By the way, I just looked up the transcript, and Haley, you were right. They say he thinks they were killed by Nikto speeder bikers. We left evidence behind to encourage such a conclusion. So I guess I was wrong with my prediction, and I apologize.
This is why Boba just needs to, like, check his facts. If he, like, and that's part, and, you know, maybe if he had talked to them on the ground and that's why they had to rule that out as a way of killing them, is they would have been like, what are you talking about? Like,
yeah, that's true.
We didn't do that. But still, like, you could have maintained the confusion. He could have done, like, I don't know. They could have skipped the conversation and just gone.
How do we feel about the Sarlacc versus Boba in his ship fight?
I thought that was a bit silly.
But totally
again, if you're a child,
remember.
One of my coworkers has kids and they loved it. I will say this: if you work for Disney and you were part of this, like, there are people who loved it and you made some
they're
children
under
happy.
10.
Not to be rude.
Wow, Grace with the shade.
Grace, that was rude.
I will say I thought it was a weird fight. And it definitely was one of those moments, even though it looked really cool. It was an unusual way of doing a fight. We're not used to seeing fights like that, but it did kind of feel like a waste of time. And this was back in episode 4. So Grace, I'm surprised you don't remember it because so much happened since then. Oh, that sounds sarcastic, but I actually meant it because a lot did happen.
Well,
I can't even remember, like, before the finale. There was so much in that one.
Yeah, so I don't really... it's all very fuzzy to me. All I really remember from that episode is that little chase in the kitchen with the cute little rabbit droid. And that was a classic example of the fun slapstick comedy that we were just talking about. That's super fun and adds a really kind of lovely element to it. But the entire time I was watching this scene, I just had Eric's voice in my head saying, we don't have time for this because we didn't.
We don't. That entire episode was just one long, like, me saying we don't have time for this, because all of the flashback material of how he comes across Fennec and saves her and gets his ship and tries to find his armor, that's 2 lines of dialogue in another show where you're recapping for the audience, oh, this stuff happened, we tried to do this, we got my ship, blah, blah, blah. You can easily, like, these are, like, highly paid, talented, Emmy Award-winning writers. You can easily find a way to make that a couple lines of dialogue in the present day, as opposed to spending, I don't know, what was that, 60% of that episode? I don't remember, but a lot of that episode in flashbacks. And also, like, the flashback material wasn't even, like, good. Like, the fights and, like, the kitchen stuff was cute, but, like, the actual execution of the flashbacks didn't justify making it a flashback.
So first of all, I love all Star Wars food. Any opportunity to see, like, the space food. I think about the space bread from Force Awakens, like, every day. But the food in Book of Boba Fett was good. And there should have been more, like, ridiculous meals served up to Boba. But the other thing I liked about that was, like, Fennec being a cyborg. But I do want to understand the mechanics of it. Like, is it all of her organs are now pistons and mechanical things?
Listen, if you can accept Darth Maul coming back and having his entire lower half first be a little metal spider body and then be, like, metal legs, you know, like, at this point, we're well past suspension of disbelief.
I'm going to disagree with that, because at least in that case, we have the hand-waving of the Force works in mysterious ways, and I'm willing to accept that there are things about the Force that we just will not understand, and that it actually is better for us if the Force has certain mysteries to it. The Force is not at work here. This is theoretically all just technology. How do you
know that Mater isn't a Jedi? That
all right,
Mater could be a Jedi.
I will stipulate that the Book of Random Jedi Mater could be the next project from Disney Plus. But until then, that didn't work for me. Like, I think actually it's an under-discussed element of this show that they have introduced the ability to just not save people's lives from grievous wounds, but actually literally resurrect people. I think that people are sleeping on that. I think it's a really surprising thing for them to just throw in here. And again, as I said earlier, I was kind of flippant about it earlier, but like, this modder guy is just a dude. Like, we don't have any sense that he's like the one guy in the galaxy who can do this, that he has some proprietary technology, that it's like this thing that they can't overuse for some reason. Like, they're presenting this, and maybe this isn't what they mean to do, but they're presenting this as, oh yeah, this just, if you find a guy who can do this, you know, he can do it.
Eric, the thing you have to keep in mind.
What do I have to keep in mind?
When they say the Book of Boba Fett, they mean like the Bible. And so the modder is resurrecting him.
Grace,
like
no.
Jesus.
Grace, no.
I'm going to just tread very carefully
You are canceled. No, so this is like,
I'm kidding.
I'm into, I like the cyberpunk, like, even like really cheesy stuff. So I sort of enjoyed introducing this like somewhat ridiculous faction of people who think they're very cool. To me it felt out of place on Tatooine, like a backwater desert planet. Like, this is the kind of thing I feel like on Coruscant, you know, or like one of those big planets, like a lot of stories down in the underworld or whatever. Like, you find guys like that. To me, it's like in the middle of like a desert. Just seems a little off. But I do like the idea of introducing new aspects to the society there. But like the questions you're asking, Eric, are entirely valid in terms.
They
of,
are valid.
Like what is the scope? Like how far can you go?
Yeah, and I don't need every question answered, but I need a little bit more of a sense that this is limited in some way. You know, when in TV and movies or whatever, generally when you're presented with the ability to like bring someone back from the dead or just like perfectly heal a mortal wound, generally the writers try to come up with some way to indicate to the audience that like, okay, this is special. This can't just be done willy-nilly. They only get, you know, one stab at this or whatever. Like, there's some effort to show to the audience, like, we're not cheapening the entire concept of death in our universe. Like, this is a precious thing, right? And they didn't do that here. They didn't give us any sense that this isn't something a random person could just do if they can find this guy. And that felt just weird to me.
What was weird was Fennec just was like, oh, like that happened to me. And then she just moved on and was like functioning the same way she did before. I just would be so traumatized. And I would be like, what kind of food can I eat anymore? Like, I would love to see the side effects of having your entire abdominal section replaced with cyborg parts.
Lactose intolerant now.
Right? You can't eat gluten anymore.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, listen, I can save your life, but you will never be able to have pizza again.
I'd be like, kill me. Just kill me. Well, my takeaway here is that I liked his hair, and he seemed like a cool dude. He liked the kind of guy you could get a beer with.
I liked the vibe of the shop. People just hanging out.
Yeah.
Should we talk about... Yeah, go ahead.
Cool idea. Bad execution. That's it. Go ahead.
Should we talk about Tatooine? Because, particularly with this finale, I've noticed a lot of discourse on Twitter, not just Star Wars people, but just like normals too, who have been like, this I think has broken through to normaldom of like, why is, and by the way, this is enhanced by the current media chatter around the Obi-Wan show. Why is all Star Wars now set on Tatooine? And is that a problem? Because a lot of the normal discourse that I'm seeing is, oh, it doesn't make sense for them to do so much storytelling on Tatooine because it's supposed to be the planet that's farthest from the bright center of the universe. It's supposed to be a place that is so obscure that Luke could be sent there and nobody would find him. And now they're doing all this storytelling on Tatooine. So is that a fair criticism, or is it just that these stories that they happen to be telling happen to have pre-existing reasons why that you would have to go to Tatooine for them?
Yeah, I don't think that's super... At least for Obi-Wan, I don't think that's super fair, because he has to be there, right?
Yeah, Obi-Wan, I think, is more just... It's getting people talking about the use of Tatooine on other shows, but I don't think anybody's saying that the Obi-Wan show should be set somewhere else.
Yeah. I don't know. I think I would have to see more, like, unreasonable uses of Tatooine to agree with that criticism. Like,
I think this was a pretty
if it shows up if it shows up in like the Andor show for no reason, like I would be like, yeah, that's a little weird.
The Ahsoka show is
I want
actually
more of
set
Jakku. What'd you say, Grace?
more on Jakku. Very different vibes. Very different vibes.
Well, we could see Andor on having some scenes on Tatooine because we know that Diego Luna loves Jabba the Hutt and just really wants to be around Jabba the Hutt.
Yeah. The Ahsoka show is actually going to be set on Tatooine too.
That's where Ezra has been this whole time.
The world between worlds is like they go to the portals and the only one that's working is the Tatooine portal and it's the only way they can get out, and Ahsoka just kind of rolls her eyes and Ezra's like, listen, I tried to find the mechanic. It looks like the others all have like out of service signs on the doors. We better not risk it. Let's just go out here.
Yeah. Thrawn is actually building his new empire on the southern hemisphere of Tatooine.
Thrawn and Ezra are like water farmers together now. Moisture herders.
Farmers. They have a bantha, you know.
I love that that's Grace's like contribution to this is like they have a bantha that they've raised together. They named it Sabine.
We're gonna write a fic.
They ride it together into town on their bantha.
We need to pitch this to Disney. Stat. Like, this is the next show.
Yeah. Kathleen, we got it.
It's not worse than anything that they've actually done in the, Book of Boba Fett. So
to be fair, it is. It is worse.
Is it? I think it would be hilarious and heartwarming.
That's what they'll say on the cover.
It has that kind of like Two and a Half Men vibe of like, adding this.
Only the half a man is the bantha.
Well, right. That's what I'm saying. The bantha is kind of the Grogu or the oh man, I've already forgotten her name from Bad Batch. I forget her name every time.
Oh, that's
Omega.
Rude.
Omega. Yeah, exactly.
It's Omega.
Omega, right. The bantha is the like unexpected, like vulnerable creature that they have to care for that brings them together. And then before you know it, Ahsoka shows up and Ezra's like, no, actually, like we're cool. We're friends. We're raising this bantha together.
I don't want to go back.
Yeah, exactly.
I think this episode of Hoth Takes has officially jumped the desert shark.
It's not a good sign for sure when we're having more fun imagining what the Ahsoka, Ezra, Thrawn show could be with a bantha than we did discussing the actual second half of Book of Boba Fett. Any closing thoughts or things that we didn't get to? Does anybody want to throw out a positive comment, because we have been pretty negative in this episode? Does anybody want to mention something that they enjoyed that we haven't gotten to yet?
I liked the Rancor.
Eric, you said you tweeted many nice things. I know
all
it's
right.
in there somewhere. So
I have one more.
End with that. Yeah.
Oh wow! If we're gonna end with this is kind of small, but I like the shot when except I'm remembering this, and now I'm gonna have to criticize something afterwards.
No.
Okay,
Only
all
good.
Right. Okay, only good. Fine. All right. So when he's testing out his new ship, when Mando, not the main character, but just a guy who's there. Anyway, when he's testing out his new starfighter and he flies up into the sky, there's this great shot of the sandcrawler just hauling this ginormous skull across the desert, and the Jawas look up at the ship that's going by and they recognize it because they helped to build it, and they sort of cheer and wave. I just thought that was really cute.
That is cute.
But then, I'm sorry, I have to say this.
No.
He goes up into space, and then the space police just show up and try to give him a space ticket. Like, that's what the New Republic is using their X-Wings for? Like, what?
That doesn't make sense, like, the mechanics of it either. Just feels like a
no,
waste
absolutely
of fuel.
not.
Yeah,
Anyway,
and a waste of airtime.
Grace, do you have anything nice to say at all?
I do have nice things to say. First of all, I liked the Rancor. I liked his little King Kong moment. I liked that. And you know what? Grogu's really freaking cute. And I realized something. Since I last saw The Mandalorian, I now have a cat. And Grogu reminded me of some pumpkin moments, and it just brought warmth to my heart. So, you know what? Do I have criticisms about Why he was there? Yes. But he, as a character, remains adorable, and the relationship with Mando, very sweet. Ooh, also, last thing, Amy Sedaris was such a gem. She was just great. Every scene, stole every scene.
She is perfect.
Loved her.
I just adored when she was like, I dated a Jawa once, but I'm working on me now. Just like, I don't know.
Incredible.
I just love that. Also on Grogu, there's a great moment where I think it's when the droids have first shown up and he steps out and he uses the Force, and you think he's going to just dismantle these droids, and that's what I was expecting. But then all he wanted is like the one shiny little like widget or whatever, and then he grabs it and he just like kind of holds it and it's like coos at it. I just thought that was so funny.
Yeah, that was perfect. I'm feeling emotional about if someone listens to this and gets their feelings hurt. So I want to end with you have dignity, and what we say doesn't matter, and you did your best.
I think
some of you.
Grace, isn't this the most like wholesome way that we've ever ended an episode? I feel like Haley is just like very wholesome.
I'm just hormonal right now. I'm hormonal and I feel very sensitive to like if other people are having a hard time. Like I don't want them to listen to me being mean.
Haley is right about all of the actors who did a really good job, and good for them.
Even the writers, I'm giving them grace, and here's why.
There was one writer. It was Jon Favreau.
Grace is mad.
I'm giving all of them grace in like for some of these things, because like our complaint about it felt empty, like there weren't enough people. That seems like a pandemic constraint in some ways, or like there are things that might explain. And part of it is probably like maybe there was a more coherent plot, and maybe people had like better ideas for the structure of some of this, and it, like just the bureaucracy got into it.
Yeah, can we be mad at Disney at least?
We're mad at Disney in general, and we understand the writers struggle to piece something together against the bureaucratic tide.
All right,
that disassembles ideas.
And obviously, Dave Filoni remains king. That's in this house. We respect Dave Filoni.
You're doing amazing, sweetie.
I will echo what Haley said insofar as like all the production related stuff, like the production design, the music, the sound effects, the acting, obviously, pretty much everything except for the writing, was and remains top notch. I mean, Star Wars in this era has really been firing on all cylinders when it comes to the people at Lucasfilm who do all that technical work. They continue to do an excellent job, and there's a reason why other studios have them do, sound design and things like that. It's because they're the best in the business. And one thing you cannot say about this show is that it is lacking in any of those areas. So we have at least that to be thankful for as a fan community, that we don't ever have to worry about those things falling short, because we have the best in the business who are helping to tell these stories for us.
That's super true. And the music was great. We love you, Ludwig Göransson.
The score was great.
All right, well, we're excited to see what comes next from Star Wars television, and hopefully some Star Wars television that we can be a little bit nicer to. But in the meantime, thank you everyone for listening. We really appreciate it. If you want to share your thoughts about this episode, or perhaps suggest topics for future Hoth Takes episodes, just go ahead and email us, hothtakes@gmail.com. You can also hit us up on Twitter @HothTakes. I'm at Eric Geller on Twitter. Grace is at Grace_Seegers, and Haley is at Birdinator. Speaking of Haley, she made our incredible logo and banner art. I edited this episode, and I put together our music, although again, for legal purposes, we do want to mention all Star Wars themes and sound effects do remain the intellectual property of Lucasfilm. If you want to listen to back episodes of this show, you can find a complete archive on our website, hothtakes.wordpress.com. And please, if you like the show, go ahead and share it with a friend or family member. You can tell them to find Hoth Takes on all the major podcasting platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher. We're pretty much everywhere at this point. So please tune in and tell your friends and family to tune in as well. We will see you next time. May the Force be with you.